Good morning. Good morning. Well, that's interesting. It's good. Good. Morning, Ashley. Morning, Joel. Morning, Amber. Morning, Valerie. Michelle, good morning. Good morning, Debbie. Morning, Mara. Good morning, Andrea. Morning, Daryl. Morning, Brad. Wow. It is I was reading, sorry, I'm kind of late getting through some of this. There is I gotta read this, hang on. All right, very good. Katie, good morning. Morning, Misty. Morning, Dylan. Sherman, good morning, Jessica. Good to see you guys on. We got a good group again today. It's always pretty cool to see consistency. I always morning, Tyson, Crystal. I'm gonna go back over to Numbers chapter 33 this time though, and go way down into the end as they begin to bring the people into the promised land as they get ready to cross over. This is right before Joshua takes over. So these books right in here, it kind of it kind of overlaps, and sometimes chronologically it's hard to, they didn't have computers, didn't have quite as many ways to handle and support things, or writing things on scrolls and all kind. It's like, so the fact that things are somewhat overlapping or written at different times, out of order, whatever it be, shouldn't be a big deal. But it is to make it sometimes hard to follow. There's a Bible that you get like a chronological Bible that'll put things into order. I have one that does that with the Gospels of the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and it shows kind of the places where things were repeated, and it helps if you're trying to study in a deeper manner. A lot of times the Bible's very intimidating because it's so big. There's just so much there. Even the pages are, the print's small, the pages are thin, there's a ton of things there. But if we look at it as 66 books, and there was different books for different purposes, as far as, the whole thing is God's inspired word, but just breaking it down a little bit helps. It's kind of that idea of the adage of, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, not the whole thing all at once. And so you kind of progress that way, but it makes it a little easier. But morning, Mom. Good morning, Mary. Good morning, Jason. Good morning, Sean Mayfield. And I didn't really look outside to see if we got any. We're supposed to get possibly a dusting of snow this morning. I don't think so, but I didn't really pay attention. I looked out, but I think I'd have seen it. I think it was going to stay south of us, which is fine. Wasn't going to be enough to amount to anything covering ours the way they talked anyway. But let's go over to Numbers chapter 33. And one of the things I think that last night at Bible study, Mom was leading that study, and we were talking about our testimonies. We talked a little bit about, she talked about some things that she's experienced in her life, and but we had different people share, and it's really important. In verse 1 here, it says, "This is the route the Israelites followed as they marched out of Egypt under the leadership of Moses and Aaron. At the Lord's direction, Moses kept a written record of their progress. These are the stages of their march, identified by the different places where they stopped along the way." And having a written record was important. On the short term, it gave them the ability to remember what's going on and how God delivered them. Also, it kept a record of how they made mistakes and what they allowed in, and the cause and the effect of things and decisions made. What do they say? If you don't remember history, you're more likely to repeat it. That's poor. I think that's pretty close to what it says. But learning and knowing history is good. Living in the past is not. So we balance those two by remembering what we've done, but also moving forward. You want to remember what you've done, so that it either encourages you or it guards against repeating it or failing in that way again. Now, that's pretty simple to say, and we all go, "Oh yeah, that's yes." But then if we're not careful, I watch people's lives, not in a negative way, but being in a position that I'm in, I'm on the inside of people's decisions and choices, and the people asking for prayer or help in some way, and so I've watched this in so many different ways, and many of you are in that same, some of you are in that same position, but you recognize or you realize the people that continue to stay in a certain place. They're not changing, they're not remembering what got them there in the first place, and they're not changing some of those things. Sometimes it's a slow process, but here in verse 50, it says, while they were camped near the Jordan River on the plains of Moab, opposite of Jericho, the Lord said to Moses, give the following instructions to the people of Israel. When you cross over the Jordan River into the land of Canaan, you must drive out all the people that live there. You must destroy all their carved and molten images and demolish all of their pagan shrines. Take possession of the land and settle in it, because I have given you it to occupy. Now, I always say, they didn't really have to do anything but show up. I've said that multiple times, and I need to clarify, yes, that's exactly right. God was doing the driving out, but they had to show up and take possession. And I want to emphasize that because I titled this, Take It. We have a promised land, so to speak. I mean, the illustration of going into the promised land wasn't going into heaven. We hear songs about crossing over the Jordan, and to me, they're pointing that to when we die and go to heaven, when really that is the transition of us making Jesus Lord and stepping into the promises of God, and they're given to us right here in this book. So the comparison to me is, when I read this book, I'm reading the promises of God. There were all kinds of instructions. See, the reason I don't believe that is heaven is because there's an enemy there. There's evil there. There's not evil in heaven. Satan's not in heaven. Satan's not, he brings a accusation against us, but it's not like he's got a room he stays in up there. No. God, there was a separation, and he's now called the Lord of this earth, but yet we've been given authority. See, they had land, the people that were in Jordan, across the Jordan into the promised land. But God said, you go, you take it. But he also gave them instructions. He said, tear down everything that is contrary to me. That's really what he was saying, God was saying. He said, destroy the carved and molten images and demolish all the pagan shrines. He said, take care of anything in your life that is a God, small g God, up against the big G, God in capital letters. Remove those things. So, and all of this pointing to our lives, that's our struggle. When we first make Jesus Lord, there's all kinds of things that are going to come into play in our lives that are going to compete against us putting God in the place that he needs to be. And but going in with an idea and a mindset, I got to do my part. God's the author, God's the finisher of our faith. But we've got to receive that. We've got to walk in that. We've got to make a determination and say, God, I'm going to follow you and I'm going to walk with you. This is what I'm going to do. And take possession of it. He said, take possession of the land and settle in it, because I have given it to you to occupy. You must distribute the land among the clans and the sacred lot in proportion to their size. So he's saying you got to divide it up so that each of the families, each of the clans, each tribe, everybody has theirs. But in verse 55, there's a warning. He says, but if you fail to drive out the people who live in the land, those who remain will be a splinter in your eye and thorns in your side. They will harass you in the land where you live. Boy, I tell you what, that right there is a challenge, but this is what I watch people do, and I've done this before myself, so it's not like I'm pointing finger and judging. But people will call Jesus Lord or make Jesus Lord and pray and want the blessing, want the provision, want to be in the promised land, but they want to allow or leave in place a lot of the things that were bringing the evil and causing them issues. So it's talking about here driving out the people who live in it. that's making that clear separation sometimes what we got to do in order to possess the land that God's promised us. We've got to make a line of separation that says, hey, this is the way I'm going to live. You know, we do that. People that are trying to walk with God, sometimes some of the toughest choices is the fact that you're no longer going to run with that crowd or those people. You've got to make a decision and a choice to separate sometimes. You've got to say, okay, at least on in an environment where you can't control the narrative or the practice or whatever's going on. You know, you can't. Sometimes there is that separation. I remember when soon I got serious with walking with God, but also when we were just married, there were certain single guys I quit running around with because they weren't going to do anything but single stuff. You know, I mean, they were going to go into every situation with an idea of pursuit of girls or talking about, you know, stuff that didn't pertain to me as a married man. And you know, it doesn't matter what age you are. I was, you know, 18, 19 years old already making those decisions. It was like, you know, I'm no longer, I'm off the market. And so girls that pursued me, which may not have been many, okay, I'm just saying. But I had the opportunity at any given point to recognize and see and acknowledge the beauty of another woman. But I had made a choice. And so I didn't need to be going around, hanging around, spending time with guys that was their focus. And that's a lot of times what, and girls, same thing with girls. So I had to make a choice and decision that I was not going to allow those. I talked about influences yesterday. Those things weren't going to influence me anymore. Well, same way with our spiritual life. When we commit ourselves to being a Christian and walking as a godly person, we have to guard against the things and the influences. That's why God was so clear with them. Drive out the inhabitants. Why? Because they were not God's people. He's saying drive out those that are going to try to bring in these gods, the images, the idols, all of these things. God makes it clear. Get rid of the idols. Get rid of the things that are gonna cause you to be tempted or be led astray or going to bring in competition between your relationship with God. God wasn't worried about, you know, he's not a narcissist. He wasn't worried about things like that might sound. That was the protection that God designed for us. It's hard to what it was a saying, it's hard to fly with eagles when you're hanging out with chickens or living like a chicken, you know, walking around on the ground, pecking off the ground when instead of, you know, totally different. So setting ourselves up that way, that's an important thing. You say, well, I don't have many friends if I do that. Well, God can bring you more friends, and in the interim of waiting on that, He can give you the strength and the peace to be at rest. We were talking last night how important it is to develop a relationship with God so that He is your greatest counsel, your greatest comfort, your stability. He is your hope. He is all of those things. And so, sometimes there's a pull and a distraction following people that, or the influence of other people. But he tells them right there, he says, you go in and you possess it. There was something they had to do. They had to cross the Jordan. You say, well, it's a flowing river. You know, at different times during the wet seasons of the year, it got pretty big. There's other times where it was not a big deal to cross it. But it must have been a big deal to cross it at that point. It wasn't like they were, on the Chisholm Trail where they had to float their cattle and swim their cattle across the river. God wasn't going to expect them to do that. But He was going to expect them to line up, get ready, and put a foot in the water. To step onto that bank, to step into that water, to begin that process. Then when they got there, they had to show up. As God made it completely, it made them completely able to achieve this. Gosh, is it already? Wow, I'm sorry, I'm going so long. Didn't realize time. But God said for you go in, you take possession of it. So as we wrap this up today, I just want to challenge, what is a promise from you that God is speaking to you? What's a part of your provision, a part of what God's given you that you haven't taken possession of? Got to begin to pursue and understand and desire to know, God, what is the authority that you've given me as a believer? What is the way that I can pray to move mountains? How do I use the name of Jesus that was delegated, the authority delegated to us as believers? Not just sitting back and saying, oh God, do something. But God, what do I need to do? How do I need to step into that possession so that I rule and reign in life as a child of God? Amen? So walk in this, step in, follow God, and remove anything that's not of Him. And go get them for Jesus. Love y'all. Morning, Bobby. Morning, Bill. Good to have everybody. Well, let's go into, we got one more day. Start of the NFR tonight. Got your Cowboy Channel deal updated? I don't know. I'm supposed to. It's kind of irritating that you got to go to Cowboy Channel and pay a subscription to get it, but it is nice to have it broadcast the way it is now. If you watch the NFR for a long time, it used to be in the middle of the night. It seemed like I'd record it, fast forward to the team roping and calf roping, and watch a little of the bulldogging, and then that was my. Some of you would go to the different events because it took a long time. You sit 2.5 to 3 hours of watching, but boy, I like it all, but had to pick and choose. Now you can set it and watch it, and it's pretty awesome. I mean, gosh, you can stay up for the calf rope and still get to bed at a decent time. All right, well, y'all have a blessed day.